Now I'd like to introduce our first session, Navigating Finances as a Caregiver with Shawn Francis, who is a special needs parent and financial advisor. Shawn, please join us on camera and tell our attendees more about yourself.
I am tasked with a bit of a problem. And here's the problem in that the older I get, I realize that I am a caregiver, a special needs parent. I work in financial services, but that is sort of the micro of what I do. I'm a person who really cares about connection, giving, and being. And what I've come to realize as a caregiver is that being a caregiver simply reminds us of how we all need the same things, basically. We need to be seen, we need to be heard, we need to know that we are loved, we need to know that we matter. And being a caregiver um, gives you the opportunity to become heightened and aware to that. Again, depending on a person's experience. I also want to thank Jessica for everything that she just shared, and it echoes the sentiments of mine, which is that more than anything, whether your vehicle happens to be financial services or it happens to be therapy, whatever the case might be, everything is about being seen and being heard. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to get into some technical things and some concepts and things like that with related to financial services. So I am originally from the U.S. Virgin Islands, live here in Southern California. My wife and I have seven children, four of which are her sister's children that we adopted, and her two daughters from her previous marriage. And our only biological child is our son Elijah, who is 19 years old and was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. Um, he, came to us at a time when, my wife noticed certain things in terms of milestones that weren't quite there and a little bit of a delay. I, having not been a parent before, thought that everything he did, whether he picked his nose or whatever the case might be, I thought that it was all just cute. I didn't quite realize myself. But we got him into early intervention, and a doctor told us, some of the symptoms that he's displaying are signs of autism, but some of those are also symptoms of a normal, healthy, neurotypical child. And our thought was, well, what does that mean? What do we do? And the suggestion was to get him into early intervention. He was diagnosed at the age of 3, and I remember the day of diagnosis because I called the doctor's office because we had not heard any information on the results yet. And the person that I spoke with, she meant nothing by it, but she proceeded to explain that he was diagnosed with autism as though she was verifying the toppings on my pizza for an order. She said, let me check. Yeah, he's got it. Yeah, he's got autism. Like, and what else can I help you with? And as I'm sure many of you can relate, there's such a myriad of emotions that you go through at the time. And around that same time, I had been working in real estate, actually working with Countrywide, who was the number one mortgage lender in the country. I worked in an environment where I supported a sales team, building relationships, and I was looking for something that I could control both my time and income. And I got into financial services. And this is around the same time of Elijah's diagnosis. So it occurred to me that if a neurotypical family needs to make the most out of their money, put their money to work for them, as opposed to the other way around, and plan for a time when parents exist in memory only, that's probably twice as important, if not 10 times more important, to our community and parents like us. So I got into financial services and I began to carve out a niche in terms of serving our families. Um, but the thing is this, I needed to get over myself. My thought was if I approach someone who is in the special needs community, talking to them about financial services and concepts, and they question my intention, I don't know if I could live with that. I had to get over that, and I had to focus on sharing what I know, offering it to those who wanted it. And I realized over time that people have to be allowed to, you need to meet them where they are. And it's one thing when you have a child that is a toddler with a diagnosis, it's almost like having a new diagnosis when they become an adult. So, about 7 years ago, we launched an initiative to build a bridge between financial services, education, and opportunity for the special needs community. My good friend Brian Altunian, who I met in the industry as well, we began a podcast um, called Just Two Dads, and we also began um, creating events and things of that nature specifically to bring education to our family and or to our community, excuse me. And just over a year ago, we launched Harborlight Financial Strategies. And so that is a bit about who we are. And we're a full service financial firm that directly serves families, businesses, and individuals. And with wealth management. And we partner with many providers that many people are familiar with, but we represent a client. We represent the family. We represent the business owner, not the insurance company, not the investment house, so to speak. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Next slide, please. Okay, so our passions are about adding value to the time of other people and then making sure that we leave a room better than we found it and empowering other people to make better decisions for themselves. That means putting people in positions to make well-informed decisions about their situation. Next slide. So if you look at the 6 basic human needs, they consist of growth, contribution, significance, love and connection, variety, and certainty. Those things go up twice as much when you are a caregiver. And I have to tell you that identifying myself as a caregiver, that is only a handful of years old, less than 5 years. I think many of us are so busy being caregivers that we don't realize that that's what we are. I personally thought of a caregiver as someone who might be helping an ailing older person that broke a hip or something of that sort. But caregiving is so much more broad than that. And that's one of the problems that we face in this country is identifying who caregivers are. Because if you can't identify a group adequately, even if you're a member of that group, it becomes twice as difficult to give that group the supports that it needs. Next slide, please. So looking at dreams versus goals, dreams require a little more than imagination. We can dream all day and escape situations that we may be in the middle of. However, goals require imagination. They also require a plan. And one of the things that can be overrated is being ready and having a perfect plan. We need to make sure that we're prepared to act and adjust accordingly as we go along the way, because tomorrow is a bunch of different things, but a promise is not one of them. So it makes sense to ask ourselves, what is it exactly that we want? And do you have a plan? Next slide. So if you look at the current situation of too many families, most are living with insufficient protection. And from a financial services standpoint, protection generally means life insurance. Most families have too much debt. They don't make enough money. They have little savings at all because we're not taught those things in school. There's very little strategy for futures. And the price ends up being negative impact on our families, lower expectations, more stress, sleeplessness, and lack of dreams. I like to say that there's more to money than money. Money is something that simply gives us choices and options. And again, if it's important to people generally speaking, I feel that it's twice as important to our community. Next slide. So, what are special needs and what is a caregiver? That might seem like a strange question, but as I mentioned, based on my own experience, when I realized that my wife and I are actually caregivers and that taking my son for an outing where we're just connecting, whether it's he and I or he, my wife and I, those are forms of caregiving, our movie going outings. As a matter of fact, I didn't stop to think social environments, those can be a real challenge for us because of his sensitivity to noises and things of that sort, and social cues and giving people space. And those can be very overwhelming. Those are all forms of caregiving. Anything that you're doing to improve the quality of the life of someone with a diagnosis is a form of caregiving. Caregiving can apply to anyone, and approximately 39.8 million caregivers provide care to adults 18 or older with a disability or illness. Next slide, please. So we have five different financial personas, which I'll get to in a minute. You have the person who is the spender, the saver, the investor, the giver, and the avoider. You may have heard of a book by, I believe the therapist is Dr. His last name is Chapman. I don't remember his first name, but the five love languages. And it says that our love language is taught based on our experience. You have acts of affection, acts of service, things of that sort. And your love language is determined by your experience. Well, so too do we also have financial personas. The person who's a spender is very impulsive with what they buy. You live in the moment, you enjoy spending money on experiences, and you tend to do that very quickly without much thought. There's a person who's the saver. They're cautious with money. They do a good job of saving, but maybe not necessarily the best at living. There's the investor, someone who takes calculated risks and knows how to put their money to work for them, where it kind of pace inflation and things of that sort. Then there's the giver, someone who's very generous with their money. And then there's the avoider, person who just does not like facing any financial challenges or problems. There's no judgment upon anyone with regard to which of these you might be, because we're all the sum total of our experience. But all of these things, our language defines how we go about making choices for our finances. Next slide. So, what is the cost? Caring for an autistic individual over their lifetime, that ranges from 1.4 to $2.4 million. The medical cost of a child with Down syndrome can be 12 to 13 times higher. Each situation is different. This is, speaks to the obvious, but there's a financial cost to what it takes to actually be a caregiver. Next slide. Aging out. That's something that we all can relate to as well. According to recent data, you've got about approximately 50,000 students with autism spectrum disorder that graduate from high school each year in the United States, facing the transition cliff at age 22. So the other thing I want to impart here, everybody here has a different situation based on the age of the person for whom they're caring. There's no better time than now, and it's not a pitch or anything like that. There isn't any better time than now to think about what the future looks like. Again, because tomorrow isn't promised. And time keeps moving. And before we know it, those that we love will, in fact, age out. And I will say, while the solutions that I'm going to share today can provide great peace of mind, I believe that there is nothing that can replace us being here, healthy and of sound body and mind to care for our children. There's nothing that can replace that. But some of these concepts can get us close to that when we face the fact that there will come a time when we exist only in memory. Next slide, please. So the idea is to strike a balance between living in the moment while having an eye on tomorrow. Sometimes we're so busy doing what we are doing that we don't realize exactly what we're doing, if that makes sense. Albert Einstein had a famous saying that says that you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness at which it occurs. So it means that everything that we're facing is right here, so to speak, in the middle. Sometimes we have to be able to step out and take a look and assess what our situation is. And so that means being able to do things like pivot and think of things like, will I even be able to retire? What does retirement look like? That might not mean that you're going to be able to sit on a beach and have pina coladas, but will you get to a point where you have some flexibility in terms of your time and your money? Those things are twice as important to our community. Next slide. So I'll go through this kind of quickly and hopefully it can still add some value. Talking about weight, but not making the most use out of time. Time, very much like money, is a wonderful servant, but a horrible master. In other words, if you're controlling it, it works well for you. The other way around, it's not so much fun. So if you look at the situation here, person A in a period of about 40 years, they've invested $200,000 in principal. The accumulation is 2.2 million. A person B, 38 years, the principal is 190 and the accumulation is 1.8 million. The difference is about $400,000. And this is an example of $5,000 a year in a vehicle that will get you a 10% rate of return. So each situation is going to vary, but again, then there's no better time than now to put money to work for you. Next slide. The rule of 72. This is a concept that says that if you divide by 72, the rate of return that you get on any given investment, that will determine how many years it will take for the money to double. Okay. And if you think about, say, your standard savings account in a bank, that has maybe 1%, inflation is at 4%. So you're technically losing money every day. But then what the bank is doing is taking that money and investing it and making upwards of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, or maybe even more percent every day. Next slide, please. So the next thing to think about is how much we get to keep, how our money is taxed. You have three buckets: taxable, tax deferred, and tax advantage. Things that are taxable, they're usually taxed on an annual basis. Regular savings accounts, stock investments, things of that sort. There's deferred accounts, things like your 401ks, IRA, which is an individual retirement account, and some forms of annuities. Tax advantage things are things that either have minimized taxes, or there are some where you actually pay no taxes on the growth. How much you make is important, but equally, if not more important, is how much you actually get to keep. Okay. If you think about it this way, if you were a farmer and you had seeds and you planted them, your harvest is yet to come, and you're told that you have to pay taxes on either the seeds themselves or on the harvest. Which would you choose? Some of you might say the seeds. Some of you might say the harvest. If you pay the taxes on the seeds, that's a predictable amount. With the harvest, you don't know how much that's going to be. So when it comes to our retirement, getting taxed on that, we don't know what that tax bracket is going to be. It is more than likely going to be higher. So it's very much of value to consider having money someplace where it can grow without having to pay taxes on that harvest. Next slide, please. So we believe in having a financial checklist, which consists of the following: being able to increase your cash flow. There's a whole nother conversation we can have about things that allow us to earn money and control our time as caregivers, whether you provide a service that other caregivers will need, creating products of value, anything of that sort. Cash flow is also increased by managing expenses, having an emergency fund that equates to 3 to 6 months of your expenses put aside in case of an emergency. If it can be a year of those things, that's even better. Debt management means a program or plan where you're able to consolidate and eliminate your debt altogether. Proper protection means the right type and the right amount of life insurance. There's various types of life insurance. Life insurance is as understood as I believe it is valuable. When my wife and I first started dating, she talked about how important things like that were. And I believed it, but it hit home after actually having children and being in that situation. We can never be replaced, but our income can be. And then the next thing is to build wealth. In other words, striving to outpace inflation and reduce taxes. And wealth means different things to different people. It means, to me, I think it just means being able to have more choices and freedom. What that means to each person depends on the person. And then the next thing is to preserve the wealth. And that means having it protected in an estate plan, preferably a trust, preferably a special needs trust if there are benefits that need to be protected as well. Next slide. So the great shift in personal responsibility is also taking place too. The traditional retirement model usually consisted of Social Security, company pension plans, and then personal savings. Well, we're not taught to save as a nation, we're taught to spend. Most pension plans don't exist anymore unless you're a civil servant, teacher, police officer, or a firefighter. And even in those cases, as we see here in California, those have been reduced. So there's a great shift that has gone to personal responsibility. And that's where we come in, because a lot of these things are not taught in school with regard to how to make the most out of one's money. But it's as easy, put it this way, it's as valuable as it might be challenging. Next slide, please. So if you ask most people what they fear most, most people fear outliving their money than they do dying. And public speaking is right up there for some folks, but statistically speaking, most people seem to fear actually outliving their money, because today we actually are living longer, but is our money doing the same thing as well? That's something, again, important to the general population, even more so important to our community. Next slide, please. So life insurance, as I mentioned, it's as misunderstood as it is valuable. Um, you have very different various types of life insurance. Term life insurance is basic coverage. It expires after a period of time. That period of time is either 10, 15, 20, 25, or 30 years, depending on the insurance company. And while it's very affordable, um, what happens is at the end of that term, you're then left with no life insurance. And life insurance is something that you have to qualify for. So you don't simply get it. So it's your qualification or your approval is based upon your age, your health, lifestyle, and your gender. And the reason for that is because statistically speaking, women outlive men. So as men, we are more of a risk to insure. So our premiums tend to be just a little higher. There's also whole life insurance, which is a form of permanent insurance. It can create opportunities to grow money inside that policy, which is tax-free, but then some other stipulations that come along with that. There's universal life insurance, and that is another form of permanent coverage. The premiums are flexible, it's for life, and because the premiums are flexible, you can set it up so that you pay premiums up until a certain age and then still have the coverage. You can grow money in it tax-free, begin to draw income from it at a certain time. What many wealthy people do is utilize these policies to create their own pension fund, so to speak. It can be structured so that you put the money in, stop paying at a certain time, and begin to receive income from it. And those are some of the cash value benefits. And what happens is when you access those funds, they can be accessed tax-free as well. So that's something that can be very valuable. There's a very common argument that people have, especially on social media, that are financial professionals and people commenting as to which form of life insurance is better. Many people feel that because term insurance costs less per month in premium, that's the only kind you should have. People believe that because permanent coverage um, doesn't go away with one of the other forms, that's the only kind that you should have. People also have this idea that because the premiums are higher in permanent policies, that life insurance companies make more money on those. That's not true. They make more money on term policies because what happens is if you have a 20-year term policy, 20 years goes by, at the end of that 20 years, you have no coverage. But you are now 20 years older and statistically speaking, older to depart closer to departing the planet. So you're more of a risk. Those premiums for a new policy are going to be higher. There are reasons why each policy type of policy works. I personally happen to have both. And my thought is the best type of life insurance is the one that is in force and active when you pass away, since you don't know when that's going to be. And it's not for if you pass away, but when. And the best policy should also be one that suits your budget and your goals and your objectives. I happen to own both. Next slide, please. I'll skip this because this just goes over a history of life insurance, and I don't think that's as important here today. The benefits of cash value, as I mentioned the benefits of a term policy because sometimes that's all one can afford. The first policy that I had was a term policy. The benefits of cash value is that there's great returns in terms of how the money can grow as well, and being able to access it for a variety of reasons. Retirement, saving for the future. It can also usually also comes with riders, which is like an extra feature for long-term care. Long-term care is being able to have access to funds if you're unable to perform certain acts of daily living, such as clothing yourself, dressing yourself, feeding yourself due to illness or injury. Next slide, please. The next thing is having estate planning. Estate planning with cash value life insurance, they go hand in hand as well, or they can, in terms of special needs trust and funding. There's tax efficient legacy planning. All of these things are based on how a policy and a plan is put together and structured. Because when you hear arguments about which is better, each person's situation is different. So it makes sense to be able to sit with someone who can provide choices and education and has access to a variety of different providers. There are some providers that work better with people that may have certain diagnosis or illness. There are some that are not as open to those things. So if you sit with someone that represents a company, you're going to have limitations on what that person may be able to offer, no matter what the intention is. Next slide, please. These are just a few testimonials from people that I have had the pleasure of being able to help and serve over the last 20 years, in and out of the special needs community. It is a privilege and honor for me to be able to add value to people's time. And so those are things that I take very seriously, and I've been able to benefit from it. We have as a family in many, many different areas and situations. And what happens is in events like this, such as the ARC, when you put together events like this, you come together with and meet people that serve the community in a variety of different ways. And to be one of those people is something that I take very seriously, and I'm honored to do so. Next slide, I think, is probably the end. This is my contact information here. The website, my email address is in the middle, and then the social media on the end there. If you have any questions, if you want to reach out to me, and at the same time, if there's any questions that anyone has now, you can feel free to do that. There is a special needs planning guide that I have as well, and that will be going out to those that attend. It includes getting information on exactly how your benefits work, having things that having everything sort of in a row and getting your plan together. And the other thing is, you may think of the plan as something that you need to start, you put it away, you set it, and it's done. That's true to an extent, but there's also a reason to go back and visit those things on an annual basis, because our situations will change, and as will our needs. So the plans always need to be, it's always worthwhile to review those plans also.
Okay, thank you so much, Shawn. I think I speak for everyone when I say we appreciate your story as much as we appreciate your services and your knowledge. So thank you for joining us today. We do
Thank
have
you.
some questions in the Q&A. If you don't mind, maybe I can read some for you
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
and answer. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, so somebody is saying it, a couple of people I think are saying it's important, as you said, to teach both our typical and our neurotypical, right? Our 18-year-old how to learn to take care of financial needs. Schools don't teach
Hmm.
it. Can you recommend anything that a young adult could do to learn about this?
Um, Off the top of my head, other than like myself, there's a great book. Um, where is it? It's back there on the shelf. There's a book by a gentleman by the name of Morgan Housel called The Psychology of Money, and it almost typifies what I explained earlier in my thought that there's more to money than money, right? I always say that even when it comes to a nice house and a nice car, we don't even really want those things. What we want is the feeling that it gives us, and
Mm,
at the end of the day, the most valuable things on the planet are people, time, and money. And the only real reason money is in there is because it gives us the opportunity to control the first two. So that book is a very good book. It frames the way we think about money, which is very crucial and important. And the one thing I did not add also, we also have a men's group, a support group called The Den. Anyone that wants to get information on that can reach out to me and ask about that as well. Also, it's a support group for men who are dads and or caregivers.
okay. How about this? First steps in for looking into special needs trusts and life insurance.
Well, and I apologize. I should have stated this. The way that we work, the way that I work as well, is that we begin by having a no commitment, no charge consultation. That means sharing some of the information that I shared here today for educational purposes, and then doing a needs analysis. The needs analysis consists of what you have coming in, what you have going out, but it also consists of what's really important to you. And people usually have one of two mindsets when it comes to that. There's things that are burning their head that just they think about before they go to bed, first thing when they get up, and they have no answers or ideas. Or there are things, especially in a caregiving perspective, where they're so busy doing it, they haven't thought about what those things are. So we kind of get to figure out what does the picture look like that you wish to paint. And once we've done that, and then look at what's coming in and going out, we then figure out a budget. How much of that can you realistically put aside to paint that picture. And that's what the first appointment consists of. On the second appointment, we come back and make the recommendations that fit that budget. And that's where that goes. So when you're looking at the life insurance, debt elimination, estate planning, an exit strategy if you're a business owner, whatever the case might be. In some cases, it's just one or two things. In some cases, they're a lot more complex. But it all
Mhm.
starts with getting together and having a first appointment.
So that's the long answer. I think the short answer is see a special needs financial planner first to
Yeah, and
help you structure what it
I
is that
didn't,
you need to do,
I
right?
didn't want to say, well, where it starts with, give me a call and
It
and we'll
starts
go
with
from
me.
there. But that's
Starts with
kind of
me.
it. Yes, yeah.
But
But
that makes total sense.
I wanted to let it be known what what to expect if you reach out to me. And not we don't do business on a first appointment if it's done at all. So it begins with a consultation and putting you in a position to make an informed decision.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I kid.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Someone's asking about having two special needs adults and wanting to know if they should meet with a financial advisor before doing the special needs trust. And I think you just answered that question, but it's like putting
Yes,
the chicken, what is it, the cart before the horse, right?
right, right. I would suggest it just because we also take a holistic approach. So if if let's say someone is doesn't even have a special needs component to their life, and they say, I need some life insurance. If they call up a someone that supposedly sells life insurance, that person is going to say to them, maybe over the phone, how much coverage do you need? How much can you afford to spend? Okay, I can
Mhm.
get you this, that, and that if you don't have any health issues, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to sell them a policy. I believe that to serve someone, you look at the entire picture, figure out what those needs are. And if at the end of the day, all they are interested in or really concerned about is the benefits of life insurance, that's all you do. But you begin by taking a look at the entire picture.
Okay. And someone's asking if they can use SSI money. And now I'm not sure if this is the adult with a disabilities SSI money, but can we use SSI money to invest in IUL? And I have to admit, I don't know that acronym, IUL.
IUL is an index universal life policy.
Ah, okay.
Um, I don't know that I would necessarily take your SSI to invest it in an IUL. But to answer the question in the most honest and accurate manner, I'd have to have a conversation with that person about exactly what their situation is in any other circumstances.
Okay. Thanks. Let's see. We don't have any more questions here, but I'm been interested in something, and maybe you have some insight into this.
Hmm.
Um, Many of us own our own houses. Some don't, but many do. And then we think
Hmm.
about, well, we maybe our loved one is going to live in our house, but maybe not. And then along comes Prop 19. So if you could just chat about that a little bit while we're waiting for a few more questions here.
Well, I hate to admit this, but with all the propositions that are out there, remind me of
Oh,
Prop
okay.
19.
So Prop
Hmm.
19 is the one that says that the if your offspring inherit your home,
Hmm.
that the property taxes, if they have to live in it within the first year of your death, and
Hmm.
they get an allowance of up to $1 million in for the value of the home and property taxes, but then anything over 1 million they will be taxed on. So in many parts of California, we've bought our houses for 300,000 and now they're worth, 4 million, and it's all in the house. And then you
Right.
want to leave it to the person with a disability, but then they're left with this huge property tax bill. So how do you, what are you counseling people on with what to do with the house? Is
Well,
that too
when it
broad of a
comes,
question? I don't know.
no, no, it isn't. Each situation is different. One of the things I like about the way that we work is that there's attorneys that we work with, there's tax professionals as well. And I would usually, in a case like that, bring them into the fold to get their input. There's certain parts of it that I know would come into play, which is having property and benefits. If those things are involved, then the special needs trust is important. Because you have an able account where you can put funds, and I think an able account is great. I think that it should be one of the tools in a utility belt as opposed to the tool. Um, and I don't know if people are aware of this too, but if you have a will versus a trust, the difference between those things is that a will is like a whisper from the grave. In other words, I don't know why they exist this way, but they're both created to avoid probate. And I know from experience that probate can be ugly. I had an uncle that had a property and left it to myself, my brother, and a couple cousins. Probate lasted 10 years, and that was
Mm.
in the Virgin Islands. In the state of California, probate can last that long. So what that means is, let's say, Alyssa, you have a good friend that you know, hung out with years ago, back in the day, whatever have you, you pass away, and there's no trust that has your last wishes. If this friend says, wait, Alyssa told me when we were hanging out together that she was going to leave her home to me. If you don't have a trust which states otherwise, it has to be heard out, right? Which is what probate is. And probate can take time and money. And if you've got money that you've left, especially in a will versus a trust, it has to go to probate. They have to hear it out. So that means that your loved ones are spending money defending your wishes because that will is essentially a whisper, whereas a trust is more of a yell from the grave, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that makes perfect sense. I know who that person is, by the way. Okay. So, when you talk about the policies you were talking about, are they for caregivers or for children with disabilities?
They can be for both. And again, this is where we learn so much. When I think about them, I think of um our situation in terms of having money put aside for um our son when we pass away. And then he has a policy of his own because there's money that he can grow at a time and have it not affect his benefits. He can have access to that later on. But I recently had a client who came to me with a situation that I had never thought of. We didn't take SSI because of our income or IHSS for a while because we quite frankly weren't clear on how those things worked. I had a client recently, and I'm trying to figure this out. It's a little bit of a challenge. His daughter, the daughter is an adult, and he's expected to care for her for the rest of his life. He cannot work because he has to care for her, so he receives IHSS.
Mm.
And he is looking to get some kind of coverage that will replace the IHSS when she passes away because he won't be able to work. I've never even thought of it for that situation. Each situation is different. Now, because there's diagnoses and things that are making it look like it's very difficult to get coverage for the child who is an adult, I'm not sure exactly how we're going to solve that one, but that's another reason why, it sounds like somebody's sales pitch when you say the best time to do this is now, but it is only because things get complicated as you get older, whether there's medical complications, age, or whatever the case might be. So, for instance, if we had met years ago, it wouldn't be as much of a challenge to try and solve this dilemma for him.
Yeah, I really wish I had the forethought to, like I said in my introduction, we spent the last year just now with with a special needs financial planner. I wish I did 30 years ago.
We all
Um,
do. Yeah.
I love this question. How can families include neurodiverse or disabled individuals in financial decision making in an empowering way?
The best way, I think, because here's the other thing too. It's about giving education and giving them choice. At least I think choice, because each situation is different. I didn't stop to think until a couple years ago. Well, if you've got, I come from a culture and environment, especially, coming from the Caribbean, where, and this is part of why I think I didn't see myself as a caregiver. There's people that I'm not a caregiver. I'm just a dutiful son or daughter. My parents took care of me, so I'm taking care of them.
Mhm.
And as a result, I thought, well, our neurotypical children are going to care for our son. That's just what they would do. And then I don't remember where it was posed to me where I was like, you know what? I never thought to ask them how they feel. So here's what I would suggest. The financial education things that we learn, we continue to pass those on to our children. How money works for one as opposed to the other way around. and then have conversations about how siblings feel about being that caregiver and taking all the responsibility. And having the conversation starts with letting them know that it's okay if it's something that they don't want to do. They have to probably have a conversation with themselves because they may instinctively just say, sure, I'll do it. And then you don't know what that really entails until you're in that situation. But encourage them with the financial concepts. And then at the same time, have a conversation with them about how they feel and give them the confidence and assurance that they're going to get the grace that they deserve if they're uncomfortable with the idea of being that caregiver, as
Mm,
opposed to just putting it on them. Because I know that there are um, professional people out there in situations, where you have a trust that's put together. You can pay someone to be that caregiver. That scares the skin off my bones, quite frankly. But each person's situation is is different, and you know you have either that or you have a situation where you thrust the child into that situation. You're no longer here, and it's not something that they want to do. Better to have that conversation before to navigate your way through that than to have it take place after you've passed away.
yeah, oh, that's entirely true. And yesterday's presentation by Ellen Cookman spoke about sibling involvement a bit. But I think that this question was more about the disabled individual, how to include them in an empowering way.
I think well, in that case, I think that it begins with questions as opposed to
Mm,
statements.
mhm,
Questions are more powerful than statements, I think, is because statements can come with judgment. But if questions begin with what is it that's important to them? What do they want to be able to do? And
mhm.
then let them know how money, if used correctly, can empower them and allow them to do those things. And again, with questions again, as opposed to, see, that works better, don't you think? As opposed to that, so
Mm,
what do you think about that? Do you prefer having this route or that one? How would it make you feel to be able to do A,
yeah.
B, and C and to be able to do that on your own? What
Well,
do you think?
there's that all important person-centered planning or person-driven planning piece of the puzzle.
Hmm. Yes,
Ask the
yes.
questions, right?
Yeah.
Um, any reassurance you can give to older parents, 50s, with a 19-year-old son who feel very behind on all this? I hear you. I was there 10 years ago.
Well, two things. My son is 19 and I'm 61, so I am you. Who, whoever that person may be. The reassurance I can give is that let go of what you can't hold on to, right? Yesterday is like smoke. We're never going to be as young as we were when I began this sentence, right? Unless you know a guy with some crazy hair and a DeLorean that can take you back in time. So you can't do anything about that. Let it go and do everything that you can with what is in front of you right now. Um, I'm happy to have the conversation just because I'm in those shoes and I wear them every day. And I'm this advocate in a professional and non-professional way. I've had this opportunity to serve as um, a fellow with Caring Across Generations, which is a fantastic organization, and run these groups, all these different things, and at the same time, I still have my "I wish I knew sooner" story. So we all do. We're all the product of our experience. Make the most out of what you have right now, and let go as much as you can of anything in the past. I will say one more thing. I saw once where it says that you can actually change the past. That sounds crazy. You can't go back and change what happened. But just like we have the option to change how we respond to or control how we respond to things that are in front of us today, we can change the meaning or the impact of something that took place before, even though we can't change that incident itself. So if you decide to look at the time that you've wasted as a lesson, then that's a little different. And then if you do that, it allows you to look at your problem as more of a puzzle than a problem. A problem is a headache. A puzzle can be something that, you know, you enjoy solving.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Solve for X. So thank you for sharing your story and being with us today and helping us to understand about financial stability for the future of our loved ones and ourselves. All
Thank you
right.
so very much. My pleasure.
Thank you, Shawn.